Yeah. All right, let's go get started then. I'm gonna mute myself during your presentations because I'm at a McDonald's right now. It's a bit noisy.
Sure.
So,
you want me to get started?
Yes, please.
All right. Give me a second.
For the Zoom recording purposes, we've already said our hellos and caught up and everything. So Ben's gonna go and jump into his presentation, and we're gonna have a Q&A at the end.
Okay. I'm gonna share my screen. Oh, I can't share my screen.
Got it.
All right. Let's try to share my screen again. Oh, I want to try this thing. Let's see how this works. Oh. Okay. Very good. Sweet. Yeah. So, hello. My name is Benjamin Von Wong. I'm an artist and activist, and the work that I do looks something like this. When people look at my work, there's a general sense of like, what am I looking at? Is this a photo? Is this a video? Is this something that's with special effects? And the purpose of the work that I do is to create a question. I think when people are curious, they want to start a conversation. They basically say, well, what am I looking at? And that gives you the chance to say, well, actually, this is a photograph. And the reason why it's glowing is because it's made out of wood and LED lights. And because I don't know how to build things on my own, I need to bring hundreds of volunteers together in order to bring these projects to life. And this was created inside of a mall in Vietnam that took over 2 weeks. And those little lines that make up the entire art installation, well, those are straws, 168,000 plastic straws that were collected over the course of 9 months, where we had to clean, organize, sort, and assemble these straws to create what essentially became a Guinness World Record art installation to show how small little decisions really added up. But what I'd like to talk to you guys about today isn't only the art and the story behind it, but also the person and what really drives the creation of projects like these. And to do that, it's always interesting to go back to childhood. And so let's start there. Growing up, I was a little bit of a walking stereotype. I did 10 years of martial arts. I also did 10 years of violin. And on top of that, I was good at math and physics. So really just the whole trinity, pretty stereotypical. And growing up, it didn't really get that much better. My dad was an engineer, and so I became a mining engineer. And I think there was this sense as I was growing up, like, how can I do something different? How can I be not just like a walking stereotype? And things really changed when I discovered a camera. I think photography was the first time where I was able to, it was the first time I was actually like semi good at something. Like I did a lot of stuff, but I was very average. I was very mediocre. But when I discovered the camera, it suddenly became a tool that enabled me to meet different people, travel the world, and create things that came straight out of my mind. And when I first started out, it was really just a modality of self-expression. I started off, just trying to create images that were surreal. These were early photos when I was learning how to use the flash, taking ordinary places that were just around my surroundings and making them extraordinary. So on the left side, it was just an excavator with one flash. In the middle, it was a piece of graffiti that we had just found while walking around. And then we just took pieces of newspaper, tore them up into little pieces and threw them up into the air. And then on the right, it was just a photo that was taken with hair and makeup inside of my garage. And so simple places could become extraordinary things only with a camera. And I was like, oh, there's something really interesting here. And over time, I decided to start playing around with special effects. There was something in me, this idea of like creating magic that I just found really interesting, where people just get that little sense of curiosity that I mentioned a little bit earlier. And so I played around with different tools such as flour, throwing it up into the air on the left, liquid latex in the middle, and then on the right, light painting using nothing more than birthday sparklers. And so simple tricks could create could really enhance an image, and that's something that I've always tried to integrate into my work. Out of all of these 3 different images, at the time, there was one that was successful in particular, and that was the one on the left. It wasn't because it was like the best photograph ever. It was just because this photo was actually the first time that I had documented one of my projects. I learned very early on that like the minute you document something, the minute you tell a story, you take something that's really just a final result where you're trying to say, hey, look at what I did. And you're converting it into a conversation. You're saying, hey, look at how it's done, and look at how you might do it too. And so from this point forward, I started doing all these different projects, and every single time I would do a project, I would have a video that would explain the process, the journey, the failures on how it was done. This was a photo shoot that actually was really hard to do. The guy wasn't lighting on fire properly. Like you see, only his back is burning. His whole body should be burning. But these were like some of the early experiments that I did. And I think the lesson that was like really, really important was that it's really important to be the guide and not the hero. When we look at when we look at movies, let's say Star Wars, for example, you have a character like Luke Skywalker, who's the hero of the story. The hero is never ready to tackle the challenges that he or she faces. It requires a guide in order to move things forward. So I guess that's like one thing that I've always tried to implement in all the stories that I tell, is there's always an element of how, there's always an element of being a guide. There's always an element of sharing the process. And I think that's one key ingredient to enroll people inside of your journey, whatever the cause happens to be. As I got older, I eventually quit my day job. I got tired of being an engineer. So this was back in 2012. I quit my day job, and I just really wanted to travel. I wanted to move around. And so I just, the work that I did started to get a little bit more complex. I had a little bit more freedom to go to cool places. And except that I had a little bit of a problem. And that was that the earlier work that I created, although it was really beautiful, it didn't necessarily spread that far. So a project like this one, where we got some characters, build costumes out of papier-mâché and just hot glue. They're beautiful to look at, but they don't have a compelling headline. They don't have a compelling title. So if I was to try to say, hey, I took a photo, do you want to see it? It's like, there's like 3 people in a tree. It's not particularly compelling. I learned this lesson the first time that I went viral, is after I decided to tie a model 30 meters underwater in a shipwreck in Bali. This is back in 2013. I was going on vacation, and the day after, that I got my dive certification, I created this project, and it was the first time ever that I had created something that really, really exploded online. This went viral. This was trending on Facebook back when Facebook had trending. It had millions of views. It was featured on a whole bunch of different blogs like Board Panda and BuzzFeed and Laughing Squid and all these different art blogs. And I think the reason wasn't because the photograph was necessarily better, like technically better than anything else, but it's because it had a compelling headline. You could go up into a bar and sit next to someone and say, hey, I just tied a model underwater 30 meters inside of a shipwreck. Do you want to see it? And it's just compelling. And so the idea that sort of titles matter more so than the actual images themselves is something that I also learned that I think is really important when we think of how do stories spread. And so the discovery of a project like this actually, this basically like dictated the direction of the next like 3 years of my career. I was like, okay, so if I do something, I need to do it big. And if it's big, it has to have an interesting headline. And so I went around and I did all sorts of weird projects. I put superheroes on the edge of a 40-story skyscraper. I went to the world's largest monastic library in Austria, where I recreated a real world Beauty and the Beast. And then eventually, as with most things, as you get better, you start getting paid to create work. This was for a whiskey company who basically said, well, you do cool, interesting things. What's something that you would like to do whatever you want, and we'll pay you and document you for it. And it's like, oh, that's kind of wild. And so I ended up in Mexico. And this is a cormorant fisherman, 30 meters underwater, again, on a toxic layer of hydrogen sulfide. And so this part of my career, I think, was like a really interesting phase where I was really striving really hard to be different, right? This idea that I wanted to be unique. I wanted to be different. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be heard. I wanted to find a way to do things that nobody else could do. And along the way, I was building followers. I think by this point, I had like 300,000 followers on Facebook. And I was starting to get paid to do the work that I was doing. But as I slowly gained, I think, the ability to create work that made me relevant, I felt like the relevancy that I was seeking in my life was less attention and more like, how do I create work that is more meaningful? Like what would be relevant to the world? And so this was like a big question that was sitting in the back of my mind. As I was grappling with the questions of like, what do I want to do with myself? The world starts to change. You might have noticed trends in Instagram. There's this feeling that over time, everything starts to look a little bit the same. This is not my work. This is just work that you kind of find online, and everyone's doing more like same but different. And and it's because algorithms these days basically prioritize content that is easy to consume, not content that is challenging. I think there's a difference between art and entertainment, where art really seeks to change people's perspectives, whereas entertainment just seeks to, make people feel good. It's kind of like junk food. You can eat it all day long, but it doesn't really nourish your soul. It's really designed for people to just scroll endlessly from one thing to the next without ever being truly impacted, without getting them to question why things are the way they are. And so, um, I was kind of faced with this conundrum, because as social media apps change, you as an artist think, well, I need to find a way to keep up with all these trends. But then on the flip side, you're like, well, I want to create art that moves the world forward, that actually has meaning, that actually has purpose. And there's always this like very strong duality. And in this case, I decided to like ignore all the trends that were going on and say, you know what, instead of going to create more work that is simpler, that is more similar, let's go like even further the other direction. Let's try to continue doing work that is complex and nuanced, and let's add some meaning into it at the same time. But what kind of meaning to add? And so I started watching a whole bunch of different documentaries, trying to figure out, well, what are the problems in the world that I could try and tackle? And so I ended up going through a whole cycle of documentaries, keeping an eye open for different opportunities. And this one time, I think we're in 2016 at this point, I was going to come back home to Montreal. My sister was getting married, and my mom had discovered a mermaid tail designer, and she said, hey, Ben, there's this really cool mermaid tail designer. Maybe you should work with her. And I was like, oh, well, what am I going to do with it? And I started doing a bunch of research online, and I noticed that, well, mermaids, where do they live? They live in the ocean. What's wrong with the ocean? Ocean has a lot of plastics. What can we do about that? And I thought, well, since my sister was getting married, there'd be a whole bunch of my extended family members in town. Why not enlist them, get my grandparents, get my aunts and uncles all together to come and create a project with me. And the idea was to put a mermaid on 10,000 plastic bottles. And so this took about a week to kind of clean, delabel, organize, and sort all these different plastic bottles. We suspended a camera onto the rooftop of this warehouse that we managed to get for free. And all along the way, about 100 volunteers came together in order to create this project that then ended up generating like 36 million views online in the video when we created it. I think we had just hit the zeitgeist of the ocean plastics problem. It was the beginning. Not many people knew about it. And this made me feel like, you know what, I think there's a place for this kind of work, because fantasy, like impact, is generally like this really like dry and sad and miserable place. But what if you can add beauty and magic and curiosity to the whole thing? What if you can make something that is boring a lot more interesting and different and unique? And I think the spread of these images, the fact that people were using it as a gateway drug to create conversations around sustainability issues, was really motivating for me to get started on this stuff. So over time, I kind of went around and I started paying attention to different things. This was a project that happened in Cambodia. I basically found one of my friends, or I went up to somebody at the end of a conference who had given a presentation on fast fashion. And I said, hey, if you ever find a factory or something with a lot of leftover clothing, like I'd love to do something with it. And I say this stuff all the time, and no one ever like comes back to talk to me. And so I was really surprised when 9 months later, she's like, hey, guess what? I found this factory. Do you want to go? And it was basically a factory that had gone bankrupt in 2008. And they had left all of these clothing fragments behind. And And so we went there, sorted and organized all these different clothes by colors, started to imagine what was possible, what kind of stories we could create with this, and ended up trying to translate different statistics, like how if a single cotton t-shirt uses 2,500 liters of water, what would that mean for our entire closet? How much water would that use? How does it affect the air that we breathe? How does it affect like the land and the trees that we're cutting down and modifying in order to just create these things that we may wear just a few times within our lifetime? And then over time, as with most things, you do it well enough, you do it big enough, you can start getting paid for it. And I ended up creating this project for Dell. They have the largest electronic waste recycling program in the world. And less than 15% of electronic waste is recycled. It's the fastest growing waste stream, municipal waste stream. And I thought, and the challenge was, how do we create images that highlight how past technologies can be used to power the future? And so we went there, toyed around with all these different electronics, brainstormed different ideas. And one of the things that I like to do is I like to steal inspiration from things that we can find in our popular culture. For example, this thing is looks like the opening scene of Blade Runner 2049, where a bunch of solar panels are arrayed in this spiral. Turns out you can make this spiral with just a little bit of math and like just rope and string and chalk on the ground. And then I got inspired by the interior of a circuit board, just using mouse, keyboards, and adapters in order to create these different lines and painting it all green. And then we take a character and give it a body paint job, just like Tron. And now you've taken these three completely familiar elements from different things that we've already seen before, combine them to create something that's completely unique, make that look beautiful, make that look different. And you suddenly have this combination of something that is both extraordinary and familiar. And I think that when you do stuff like that, then it can really draw people in. They sort of have a little bit more fascination with these things that then enable you to have all the unique conversations that you really want to talk about, like how the gold that's found in circuit boards are super valuable, yet we just throw them away into the trash heap where they actually can leach toxic chemicals back into the environment. And so that's, I guess, like the trajectory of my social impact work. And although things look like they're going well, like the projects are getting bigger, I'm starting to get paid, the people are starting to care about these different issues. There was a problem, I think, in the work that I was creating, at least as far as the trajectory went, because although my art was improving, my ability to reach people was actually going down. Because that 10,000 hour rule that says, like, if you put 10,000 hours into something, you can become an expert at it. Well, that only really works if the environment in which you become an expert isn't changing. And the environment of marketing oneself as an artist is constantly changing. And so the fact that I was ignoring these algorithms, that I wasn't paying attention, or I just refused to play that game and really wanted to focus on creating work that was more meaningful, that took a longer time, meant that I was actually falling behind. So even though I was getting better, I was still falling behind in my ability to reach people and move the world forward. And if what you care about is activism, then you also need to make sure that whatever it is that you create gets communicated with the outside world. And so I started to feel like, even though the work I was creating was more and more relevant, I, perhaps as an artist, was losing my ability to be relevant because I was losing my ability to reach the right people. And so this is a lot of what I was sitting with during the pandemic, right? This big question of, like, what am I doing? Does it work? Where am I headed? Like, how am I really going to survive in the next decade? Like, does this work actually, like, can I survive doing this work? And as with most things, you have these questions, but you don't really have answers. That doesn't mean that you have to stop, like, trying, or you give up. I think you still move forward regardless, and you just hold space for those questions, and hopefully an answer comes out. And so during the pandemic, I created this project. Single-use plastic production increased by 250% during the pandemic. And it's very easy to see why. All the takeout containers, all the plastics that's used to wrap everything. And I really wanted to create something that would highlight the problem of plastic production, right? I wanted to stop addressing the symptoms. I wanted to go straight to the root cause and create something that really that really took this message home. And so this was a project that I created with the help of my family. My mom is the model on this one on the bottom right corner. She's very short. And so she makes the installation look very tall. We just gave her like a little worker vest. And then, wanted to talk about how, so much of the Western world exports its plastic waste to different countries in the world, which is why we did this inside of a shipping container yard. We wanted to talk about how plastics flows into the ocean, but the statistic used to be every 60 seconds a truckload of plastic flows into the ocean. These days it's every 60 seconds 2 truckloads of plastic flows into the ocean. So these numbers are only getting worse every single time, and if we don't find a way to take this under control, then we're kind of screwed. My dad is the model on this one over here on the bottom left, and then over here we have my nephew modeling and in the yellow shirt. And my nephew was born during the pandemic, and I spent a lot of time sort of thinking about what kind of world he's being born into and what the future holds. And I think there's just this weight of like, even though there's a fear around the future, like we definitely need to take action regardless, right? Like you still need to do something. There's something worth fighting for. And so this was a project that we did with the help of hundreds of volunteers, as usual. Over a ton of plastics were collected, cleaned, tied together in order to build this thing. The installation had to be built, rebuilt, and transported over and over again at all these different places. And it was a tremendous amount of work. I mean, it took like over 9 months to like plan and build and produce and find the funding and do the thing. And deep in the back of my mind, I was really worried because I was like, wait, even if this project is successful, am I going to actually reach enough people? Like, I know how to take photos, I know how to create these images, I know how to tell stories, but how do I make sure that it actually hits people? Because if you're not posting regularly every single day at a certain time in a certain way, and you haven't built a community or, I don't know, a bunch of people that just want to follow this everyday sort of like dancing monkey process, then how do you actually reach people? And I wasn't really sure. So I decided to ask for help. I think that when we are scared of not being able to do things alone, that's sort of this opportunity for us to reach out for help. And in this case, I started saying, okay, I have this symbol that I've created, which is this giant plastic tap, this giant faucet spewing plastics. What if I asked other artists around the world, other influencers, other folks who are doing beautiful work, whether or not they wanted to join in this mission to create something? And so I gave the symbol to a bunch of different artists and artisans around the world. And they came back with all of these different concepts that I could have never thought of myself using Photoshop as a tool. And suddenly, I didn't feel so alone anymore, because there were now a whole bunch of other people using their platforms, using their voice, using their skills, using their talent to take something that was really just an image and transform it into a symbol. Right? A symbol gains power the more people use it, the more it gets adapted, the more it gets remixed. And this felt really, really exciting. In parallel, I thought, well, maybe it's not just about doing this in the digital realm. What if we use this physical symbol, which I knew was a powerful one, and tried to get it seen in the places where it mattered the most? And so we ended up rebuilding this in Nairobi, Kenya. This time even bigger. This one was 40 feet tall, using 3 tons of plastics. We got the plastics from a slum in Kibera, which is the largest slum in Africa. The plastics, we hired 100 ladies to come and help us clean and tie and prep all the plastics. And maybe most importantly, this art installation was created at the United Nations headquarters, where 1,500 delegates from 193 different countries were coming together to create a global plastics resolution on like, how are we going to solve the root cause of the plastic problem? And so it's kind of funny to me, because this project basically is the result of me caring about something and not knowing what to do about it, not knowing how to solve it. And so this huge fear of creating work that was not going to be relevant actually ending up becoming the symbol that all these other delegates are taking photographs in front of. Like my fear of irrelevancy was now the symbol of hope for so many others, a symbol of unity for so many others, all coming together. And it didn't stop here. The success of the project here actually ended up leading to more versions of this faucet now being created in all sorts of countries. I think it's now being displayed in 8 different cities and in different shapes that have been rebuilt by different people. And it seems like the momentum isn't really going away. There's a demand, there's a hunger for this thing. And it just brings home, I think, one big lesson. And that is, when we look towards the problems of the world, when we look to all the challenges that the world faces, and we look at the size and the magnitude of the problem, and we just feel so small, maybe that's not that bad of a thing, because ultimately it is our collective fear of being irrelevant that enables us to create work that is relevant. Because change doesn't really happen alone. Change happens in community. Change happens when we reach out to others who share a similar mindset and we come together to work on something, not when we work on something alone with our way. And each one of us have something really cool to contribute to a cause, to a mission. And so if you believe in something and if you feel small, don't worry. There's a lot of us that feel that way. And together we can create really awesome things. So that is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ben. And thank your parents as well for creating you.
Yeah. They don't know what to do about me most of the time. They're like, oh my gosh, why couldn't you just be normal like everyone else?
Yeah, well, this is why.
Yeah.
Caroline joined us halfway through. Welcome, Caroline.
Wow.
Caroline is a graduating senior at Cornell. She is majoring in data science.
Cool.
And please correct me if I'm wrong. She's our returning intern for Liberatory learners. So Ben, first of all, holy cow. How long have you been doing this work for?
Which part of the work? Like
the start, I feel like maybe like starting with it becoming a social justice, when you inserted the social justice element in.
Yeah. That was like 2015. So seven years or something. Yeah. Okay. But I bought my first camera in 2007. I'm getting old.
Got you. Yeah, I say, for 1 minute, when you turn 89, you get to say that, okay? For 1 minute, for the 1 minute that you're 89.
Yeah.
The creator of Grey Goose was 77 when he made Grey Goose. Give you.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
I heard that one. Yep. From Gary, what's his name? The business guy that wants. Thank you. Yeah.
The guy that repeats himself all the time. Yeah.
So Ben, I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
And Kyle and Caroline, please ask away as well when your questions come up. So my first one, I guess you answered that already, was how did you get started in this venture? But you sort of explained that in your presentation. Mm-hmm. My other question is, what happens to the plastic after these projects are over?
Yeah, it really depends on the project. The plastics that you saw in the giant plastic tap, the original one, for example, is still traveling. The same plastics gets used over and over. Every time we go to a new place, we just use it again. When an art installation gets destroyed, like the straw installation, for example, we couldn't find anyone that wanted to pay to like move it around. It was too complicated to reinstall. Those ones specifically got recycled into concrete. So we try basically to find a way to dispose of the plastic in the most responsible way possible that is locally available. And I think that's kind of part of the conversation. The ones that we use in the Mermaid and 10,000 plastic bottles, well, those just went back to the recycling center that we borrowed it from. And I think that's sort of part of the conversation. It's like, what do you do with all this stuff? Like, there's no good solution for it. Like, if you recycle something, it really just goes back into some product that then eventually ends up in a landfill, right? Like, we don't recycle things infinitely. We don't have a circular economy. And so that question of like, what do you do after is essentially the same question that we ask ourselves about everything that we use.
That feels multiple tangents on that note. So about 2 years ago, the plastic obsession became pretty overbought, I would say, in 2020. And I was like holding on to like as much plastic as I could at home. And it was literally like overflowing through the cabinets. And it became like, I really felt like I was this hoarder at home with a bunch of trash that I didn't know what to do with. And I made this short video of me like literally swimming in the plastic that I made this like pile in. But then I was like, I can't throw this away because that defeats the whole purpose of what we're doing. So I started making these creatures. I got like super glue and like I glued all these things together to make a plastic creature. And then I kept it around. And Susan, who you'll meet maybe on the 25th, she's working with us next week. Susan's a activist in Hawaii and based in Worcester, and she makes these kits from plastic. She was like, you know, if you're gonna throw it away, that sort of like, but I couldn't take it apart because it was being glued. So at the end of the day, I had to throw it away. But that was the seed, I believe, for fast forward 2022. I was in New York City, and I was there in December, and you know, after having moved to the woods, I came back and I was like reintroduced to how much trash was overflowing the city again. And I had this idea. I was like, word, most of this trash is coming from the food industry and the packaging industry. So if there was a way to swap out the plastic inventory that exists in restaurants with organic alternatives, there's a business element in that. And then there's also a construction element in that, where we do that swap and we give them 6 months worth of free inventory. That's doable, anything's possible. And then we take all of their inventory that will otherwise end up in circulation, and then we start building. And I was like, okay, but building what? And I have a background in real estate, and I know, like, even right now there's like this empty 27 square foot building that's you know what I'm saying? Like, no one's gonna use this for a while. And I know for a fact that there are multiple parcels of land all over America that are empty. No one's using them. What if we can create a story from New York City, from the East Coast, make multiple miniature sculptures, attach a story to them from the plastic that we gather from different places, leading to Nevada, where we'll construct our plastic museum. So that gave me inspiration to start creating curriculum for the plastic museum that Caroline and I developed curriculum for over this year in January. And that's what we're going to be teaching September 5th. That's going to be like a 4-week class of how do we actually get this implemented? What are the bolts, right? Like, how do we end plastic production on a realistic scale without sort of imposing our opinions or our, you know, rage onto the industry, by making art and creating stories around it. So that I want to share that, and I did. So that's been on my mind and like heavy in my heart. It's going to take a lot of people, but I do feel it's like, what else are we doing with our time? A lot of us have, you know, sort of like, we're taking that ticket, exiting the matrix. We're not going to be showing up to our 9 to 5s. A lot more people, especially our generation. I'm 31, so like I know like my friends who are like artists and musicians, especially like the people that I met last night, like they're on it, you know what I'm saying? So there are these communities that are already being formed, but they're forming around like different things. But at the end of the day, they all care about the same thing. You know what I'm saying? Like we all want our kids to be safe. We all want the oceans to be clean. We want drinkable, clean water. Like, these are basic things that, regardless of our political stance or whether or not the introduction of whatever is happening right now, are you this or are you that? Like, across the board, like, raise our hands. Like, what do you want, you know? And we all want the same thing. And so I feel like if you can come and focus in on that unit and reiterate that as much as possible again and again and again, Kyle, Caroline, you kind of already know, like, the future I see you guys is so colorful and it smells so good and it's so clean. And maybe this is like my Singapore upbringing. Like, I know how good it can be. I've seen the possibility of a country that comes together. I mean, Ben, you've been to Singapore. Like, it's crazy clean and it's crazy safe. So like that as a model exists regardless of their political sides, right? Like, we can focus on the positives and really like blow that up, right? And then like spread that. So that's my personal vision of where Liberatory Learners is going, where Titties is going, where I'm being led to go, not only as a activist, but also as a musician, a traveling musician, and an artist and a writer and a performer, like that sort of like. And so connecting with you and Susan and Gary is huge. And Kyle and Caroline represent the generation that's doing a lot of the, like, I want to call it grunt, bless you, doing a lot of the grunt work, like the emailing and like the really like the heavy, like I want to say like the back end heavy lifting of this stuff, like, because like they're doing so much of that I wouldn't have ever been able to do. Like, they're taking on a huge brunt of this work with me. So really shout out both of you guys big time for showing up here today as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's super interesting. I mean, art has the role, to me, art has the role of keeping conversations alive, right? Because it's so easy to let these things that are out of sight, out of mind disappear. And if you can draw new people into the conversation, and if you can give people who are already fighting in these different spheres opportunities to strengthen their positions, and give them hope and give them a sense of momentum and uh, and 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 give them the public support that they need, then change can actually happen. But like, change is a combination of innovation, of policy, of taxes. Like we need to figure out how to engage all the different parties. And it's not about, I think, plastic specifically is an interesting one, because plastic. So if we take plastic awareness, like we need to raise awareness for plastic, the plastic problem. Plastic awareness is at an all-time high. Like everyone knows it's a problem, at least in North America, let's say. And plastic production is at an all-time high. Like if you look at the graph of plastic production, it hasn't gone down. Every year it goes up, year over year, 9 billion tons since it's been invented. And every year over year, it goes up and up and up. I think it's set to double by 2030 or something like that. It's just wild. And so I think awareness alone isn't the key. It's figuring out how do you enable those who are in power to help change the system, to make it possible for change to happen. Like consumers, I think these days don't even have a choice. You can barely go to a supermarket and like not buy plastics. Like it's hardly a choice. And there's like a reason why the zero waste movement is like basically middle-aged white people, because it takes a certain amount of privilege to prioritize this kind of stuff. Because if you're struggling to put food on the table, you're not thinking about the environment. I think like poverty is one of the biggest things that are keeping people from it. And so how do you hold space for all of these challenges and continue creating at the same time? I think is a big problem. So as long as you stay inspired and you're asking the questions of figuring out how do you fit within an ecosystem of players, I think there's like so much that is possible. And it's really only one step at a time and all together that change is possible. So I think it's really cool that you have this really big, interesting vision. I think people really buy into larger visions. There are so many companies these days that are really trying to shift away from plastic. And then on the technology front, there's so many new systems that are finally being implemented. Whether they're like alternative materials, which currently are causing more problems than solutions. So all the
more about them. Sorry, Ben, to interrupt you. What do you mean
so,
by that?
So we have factory compostable plastics or industrial compostable plastics, as an example. Bioplastics. Is a bioplastic better than standard PLE?
Understood.
PLE?
Yep, exactly. Yep.
Right, like it's actually, so like how much of it is greenwashing, how much of it is actually helping. Even if something is industrially compostable, do people want to compost it? Because I don't know if you know this, but like a lot of bioplastics that are factory compostable are generally made of like cornstarch, which actually lower the quality of the compost, so that the farmers don't really want it. So like it's compostable, but do we want it to be compostable? There are different plastics that are currently being invented that are completely biodegradable in standard marine environments. Those are coming out. They might be great. And what happens if everyone switches to it and it just goes into the water stream? That's going to like completely unbalance the ecosystem anyways. It's sort of like when you put too much algae or too much oxygen in an environment, it can completely unbalance the ecosystem. So just because something degrades doesn't mean we want to put a whole lot of it somewhere. So maybe it's our disposable culture that is the problem. Maybe we need better systems of reuse, right? Like there are so many different details when you start digging in, that are the problems that we're facing. And there's probably no silver bullet solution, right? So we always just need to strive towards progress, like better, recycling is not the solution, but it is part of the solution, right? And so how do we have better recycling and better waste management systems and better products designed in the first place and more reuse and recycle, and we try to shift culture away from disposable into reuse, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we need to do it all at the same time. And hopefully, I mean, it's basically a race to figure out whether we can be smart enough and be innovative enough to do more. So there's no one solution fits all, but I think it is going to be exciting.
100%, absolutely agree with that notion of PLAs, and having the sticker be, this is biodegradable, and then and it essentially becoming microplastics, which is, it's funny. So you're drinking from that, right? So I'm intentionally drinking from this plastic bottle to remind myself. It's like, it's so crazy. I used to have this really big pink one that I would reuse and stuff, but it's still made from plastic. But I mean, we're talking about massive corporations, right? And you can't even get like one corporation. I forget. Oh yeah, it was the Breakthrough from Plastic organization that I was on a call with 2 weeks ago. And I was asking them because they're doing like brand audits, and I told them, as much as like I understand what you guys are doing, it's sort of like we're still doing this like surface level research of what this thing, as if we don't know these brands are doing shit like this. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We know and they know. So like, what are we really doing here? And I feel like my role is to come in with the bullshit meter and like slash through that stuff. Like I'm trying to understand like my role more of like as an artist and really as like an organizer or like a community activist and all that stuff. It's like I'm a bullshit meter, and like I'll go in and I'll say the thing that nobody else wants to say, and I don't give a fuck. Like I was, and that taught me last night, doing shit like last night really taught me that like that's really my role, because once I did that, someone else came on stage and they did a song that they wouldn't have otherwise sang. So I was like, okay, like I'm doing something here. You know what I'm saying? But and before I perform, I get the audience to repeat after me. We as a collective are going to end plastic production once and for all, and I have them repeat that. We as a collective, and this is the thing here, Ben, that I really want to hone in on. When we end plastic production, there's a chain reaction that was given to me as a download that we will end slaughterhouses. At first, it was like all messy and didn't know which order it came through. But I watched. What did I watch? Something happened. I must have did some like. I know it wasn't. I didn't do. I was gonna take. I know. We're being recorded. I don't really care. But I did a mushroom trip like a couple of weeks ago. But it wasn't that. It was something else that like. I watched this. That's right. I watched this shaman video. I was like, the initiation process of shamanism, and it was during that video that I was like, oh shit, there is a sequence to this. It's not a hierarchy necessarily, but there's a sequence of what the events are going to unfold because of the materiality of plastic, and slaughterhouses are different compared to homelessness, poverty, war, and slavery. Those four elements are sort of nebulous. Right? Like we think about a thing like war, for instance. There's an organization called World Beyond War, founded by David Swanson. And it's like super complicated. And one of their main missions is to buy up billboard spaces to sort of like reintroduce that, like, we're going to end this thing. And one meeting, he said, the biggest, obstacle of people's perception is that people don't actually fundamentally believe that we can live in a world without war. So that's also part of the like on stage, asking people, do you believe in a world without plastic? And it's sort of like getting people's like, where is everyone on that scale, given how much we've been inundated with. So once we end plastic, we're going to end slaughterhouses. And I'm really working to like figure out how to like explain this to people without them being like, how, like, what do you like? No, like, you know what I mean? Like, because I can already like sense all that coming my way. Once we end slaughterhouses, because this is a logistical thing, the people who are involved in slaughterhouse, the animals, the people who work there, and the people who own the slaughterhouses, we have us as the consumers, which is falling again on our responsibility of like, the first thing that people ask me, well, what can I do? I'm like, the first thing you can do is to be vegan, like, but not like a hardcore vegan, like I don't eat honey, or like I'll never, you know what I'm saying? Like I used to be that way and it wasn't helpful. I isolated myself a lot from people, and I could push a lot of my friends and family away because I felt so I couldn't sit my family when we went for Chinese New Year. Like I would sit outside. You know what I'm saying? Because I was like, I'm not gonna eat this shit. I'm not gonna sit with you guys. You guys know what this shit does, and you guys still do it. And this is the energy that I was playing with. I was like, when we know that something is wrong, and we do it anyway, not only is that a stupid thing to do, because I mean, that's a definition of like stupidity, right? Like something is bad and like you do it anyway, right? Like I mean, we've all done. Like I used to, smoke cigarettes and drink alcohol and all this stuff for myself. And I was like, I know, but I don't care. It's always like, I don't care element. It's really small and it can slip in. It's like, oh, what's my one individual choice going to do anything? Like how is my one choice going to make a difference? And it's the paradox is inescapable. Like I'm sitting here drinking my fucking McDonald's right now. You know what I mean? So it's
I think of so I'm vegan also, but I'm also like a practical vegan. Actually, I've been eating duck eggs for the last couple of days because I went to visit the ducks, and they were my friend's ducks, and I was like, oh, these ducks are happy. They got like an interior like trailer to hang out in, and they got an exterior garden to go chill in, and I'm like, and they're really happy ducks. And I'm like, oh, so much of like environmentalism and activism is about excluding things from your life, and it's so nice to be able to invite positivity once in a while. And I think so much of like, so for the micro decisions, when we think of them and say, oh, well, it doesn't matter, like my choice to be vegan is not going to change the industry, and to a certain extent that's true. And I think when we do that, when we start taking back control over our own decisions, that gives us the power to change. If we can change ourselves, then we can change the world. Right? If we say like, oh, well, my anything I do is not going to matter, then you're putting yourself in a position of saying, well, I'm powerless. And you're doing that all the time. And so I feel like every time I opt into my values of, being vegan, choosing what I put into my body and making decisions that are better for me and hopefully the world, it's sort of like stepping into your own power, right? So there's that one piece. As far as the slaughterhouse one goes, I actually think it's easier to get rid of. I think we're going to get rid of slaughterhouses before we get rid of plastic. And here's why. So we live in a capitalist world, right? So money makes the world go around. And ground beef today is the same as it was like 100 years ago, or same as it was 1,000 years ago. It's probably worse today than it was 100 years ago, actually, because we're raising all of these animals in like the worst possible conditions. And moving forward, when we look at like all these plant-based meats, how much better is a plant-based burger today than it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago? Like they're so much better. If we look towards even cell-grown technologies that are going on right now, where you're like 3D printing meat, essentially, like these technologies are starting to hit the shelves. Like we have, I don't know, here in Boulder in the supermarkets, we have basically milk that is grown, not with cows, but just grown inside of vats. And this technology is brand new. It's only getting cheaper. It's only getting easier every single year. And so basically what I think we're going to have is we're going to have cleaner, more sustainable, more ethical food that is going to be able to be produced. Whether we want it or not, it's just going to happen, and it's going to be cheaper. And so the big marketing machine is going to kick in, and all these, like, I actually think animal production is going to be obsolete in like 100 years.
Sooner, hopefully. I mean, Ben, we can make this happen in a year. I know it sounds crazy. No, I'm being so serious right now. Like, I see it. I feel it, and I see it. 100 years is we can't have that much suffering continue on for 100 years. And like that's and this is the thing about us being able to manifest our future. What we say and what we believe, okay, for real. And that's why I have people say and repeat after me in the audience. I'm like, it's the collective enunciation of our vocal cords that makes the stuff happen. And so what we choose to say, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, so like when you join these movements, like the Break Free from Plastic movement, as an example, you realize that everyone wants the same thing, but everyone sees it sees it happening in a different way. Everyone's telling a different story. And so, you have 100,000 different stories that are all slightly moving in the right direction, very, very slowly. It's just like what I've experienced as the speed of change. And so I guess I fall into a more sort of like skeptical mindset of how much change, how quickly change is possible. When you look at a company like Nestle, where a single bottle plant produces 30,000 bottles per minute, and they've created an entire business model that, it takes 30 years for this thing that they built that costs billions of dollars for it to like or hundreds of millions of dollars to turn a profit. They need to keep creating the thing because the ledgers demand it, and they're run not by people, but they're run by people, but the people are shareholders that care about profit margins. And so it's just kind of how the world works. And so I just think like we live in a world that is just designed around capitalism. And so anything that speaks the language of money needs to be deconstructed with the language of money or regulated with the language of policy. And I think, at the end of the day, it's every company is run by people, and every person thinks they're doing the best that they can. And everyone knows it's not enough. So I'm a little bit more skeptical about the speed of change, but I'm very, very happy to be proven wrong. I would love you to be right. Yeah.
There's something about generational wind down that I want to hone in on. The older one person gets, they've been around the block longer than a lot of us have, and they've sort of seen this gradual.
We don't have the same naivete.
I'm sorry, the same what?
Naivete. Like,
yeah, right. Yeah.
When
yeah.
naive.
Or or like hope, levels of hopefulness, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Every new generation swings in like, what's that? He's 25 or 26 this year. The guy that made that great ocean cleanup. You know what I'm talking about?
Ocean Cleanup Project with Boyan.
Thank you, boy. And yeah, there we go. Yeah. And it's like, he's 25. You know what I mean? Like, come on. And so from my experience teaching these kids, like Kyle, Caroline, Emma, and the SYEP interns, like they're only getting smarter and more aware. And because of that, we serve as the bridge, right? Then like we're like the elders in this game. Yeah. So we take our expertise and our knowledge and our hearts and our love. Also, love makes the world go round, not money. We want to think it's money, but it's really love. If there was no love, we would all be dead. We would stop producing, we would stop wanting to live, we'll unalive ourselves tomorrow. You know what I'm saying? It's love. There's still this spark in all of us. So I need to say that to cancel out that thing. Bridge, transfer information, inspire, and then they go build it. Yeah. And then we can sit back on our porch and be like, good job. Like, yeah, we did it. You know what I'm saying? Like, no, for real. You know what I'm saying? Not like in a yay me, but like we're doing our work. Like I can either go work for an ad agency or like go make copy and write for same thing. Like my parents like, we give you all this education and you're gonna go be a dishwasher, because I was doing that because I was doing art, and I was like, I'm not gonna work for a 9 to 5. I don't care how many degrees I have. I don't give a fuck about that shit. But that's me though. You know what I'm saying? Like that was like my upbringing, living in poverty and homelessness, and like that was like my like childhood, and like that for like framed my consciousness. And I was I see through this bullshit. I'm not gonna work for these guys. Like I can't. So that's, forget where I was going with that, but whew. I feel it. And also maybe another thing too is about being the television of good news. There's so much bad news out there. It's like, if we can only report on, this is a segment I wanted to do in a show. I got who the fuck is show things. Like, we only report on the good news. That's all that's happening. You know, because people need to see like what's actually going on. There's been a huge imbalance of this stuff, and because this is a huge impact, people are like, yeah, there is no hope. The world is going to shit. But it's like, it's not true. Based on what I'm going through and like what I see and the things that I know about, like, how can you, there's so much good that's going on, but it's not being pushed out enough. It's the machine works on people's misery and their suffering, and then they get, let's eat this and let's buy this and make ourselves feel momentarily good and stuff. And that's the of the cog, you know. And unless someone comes in and throws bro, I got my tires, I'm going to use this analogy, like your origin story. I was getting my van fixed. The guy checked my tires, right? And he's like, hey, one of your tires are like going flat. And I'm like, oh God, it's going to be like $800, blah, blah, blah. And you know how they spray, like they spin the tire to find out where the leak is. So they spray with soap to see if there's going to be a bubble that pops up. So they found the bubble. It's this tiny little nail, Ben. Tiny. But that one tiny little motherfucker got my entire tire to deflate. And because of that, my van was like this. And once that the unalignment, like that can fuck that fucks with the axle, that can fuck with the end, like everything will get like messed if that one little nail didn't get taken out. So I see us as those little nails in multiple cogs of the machine, fucking shit up. It's gonna get fucked up. It's already going, and this is their last. When I hear you say 250 times plastic production, that's their final like attempt of fuckery with us. They're out. We've already won. This is the thing, and we've already won. They've lost, and so it's just sort of like, instead of being like a graceful player and exit the game with a handshake, they're gonna try and like, you know, throw their trash on the ground and like spray paint the exit sign, you know, and like flip us off as they're leaving. Like that's what's happening right now. So
I don't know. I'm not sure I agree with the fact that they're gone, because and I also don't think there's us and them. I think we're all the same. It's impossible to go through a single day without touching plastic. The seat, the chair you're on, the clothing you're wearing, the headphones you have, plastics is everywhere, and it serves many useful purposes. I mean, we can't actually switch. If we switched everything that was single-use paper, plastic to paper right now, it'd be terrible. I mean, paper has like what is it, like 100x the carbon footprint of plastics.
Yeah.
Like it's not that we have alternatives ready to go right now, because if we did, they would already be out there. And so much of what makes the world go round is made of plastics. And when we look at, I don't know, did you see like how good the petrochemical industry is doing these days? Like
these days, sure,
record-breaking profits, right?
Yeah.
Petrochemicals are what they're plastics. Like plastics account for like a huge section of like how much is going on. And so like I don't think they're on their way out yet. I think there are a number more. I think what we're experiencing is it's a rebalancing. So it's starting, and I don't know if we're really ever going to eliminate plastics. We're just going to simply find better ways to make them more circular. I mean, this is made of plastics, right?
Yep.
Plastics, or
Some sort of silicone.
there's some layer of plastic. It's metal, but yeah, and then like I don't know. I go to conferences, and then every single conference I go to, I get given one of these stupid things, and I'm like, I don't need 15 like water bottles. I'm happy with one. And I don't know. I think the incentives are misaligned. Like we live in a culture that tells us that we need to consume in order to be happy. And whatever we're consuming is actually the problem. It's this cycle of consumption that is a bigger problem than plastics itself. Plastics is simply the technology that is currently occupying our brain space. But if we were consuming something else at the same frequency, it would be just as problematic. So I don't know.
Yeah, man, that's the role of being an artist, is like, how do we change people's perceptions about this stuff?
Yeah.
Like, how do we like get in there and like clean out the gunk that's been like layered on? I 100% feel that, 100%. But it's really not about replacing everything. Our exercise on Wednesday, one of the classes that we did with Kyle and Caroline, was listing out all the plastic that you see around in your vicinity, and then making a list of all those things, and then organizing it according to industry and then brands and where are those things made. And so being able to see it like that is the first step. But I feel like when we're talking about making these headphones out of like another material, that's not really where I'm headed with where I'm, that's not really, it's about using the source material. It's like the raw, instead of fracking and turning those things into polymers, we have to end that on that scale, and then use the plastic we already have in circulation, on top of the fact that people are going to start reusing and recycling a little bit more, which is why we're keeping our plastic at home. So one of the exercises that we're doing from now until the next 12 weeks, at least for myself, when I move back to New York City, is to create as many spaces as possible. Ben, I'm going to really need your help, and we'll talk about this offline, but we're really asking for a commercial space in New York City to give us a healing hub, right? Okay, and then we're going to go and do this type of presentation in schools, in hospitals, in community centers, in libraries, as much as possible, to get people to keep your plastic at home. So even in McDonald's, I'm going to take this, this tray thing, right? I'm going to hold on to this, and then I'm going to hold on to that. And I have a whole bag of trash in Tennessee that I hope they don't throw. I hope my son doesn't throw it out and think it's trash, because it's not. It's like, these are materials. So, and then we would start collecting all this stuff on a community level, community scale, and build out these insects. And we'll talk about that offline as well. But I'm like obsessed with spiders right now, and like wanting to build. The oldest spider is this, I googled like oldest spider. It looks gnarly. It's crazy looking. Anyway, that aside, I feel like that's one sliver of a solution to keep our trash at home, so it doesn't end up in the trash can. And then we go ahead and we collect it on a community level, and then start building it out from there. That's one thing. And then when we talk about the corporations, I do feel like this is an energy work, right? This is like my work with like shamanism and like understanding like my role as like an artist, and like changing and like morphing energies and stuff like that, which is why I say that when we connect the plastic slaughterhouses, homelessness, poverty, war, and slavery, these things start to get unraveled. Once we start making decisions from a different place, from a different consciousness, that's really what I mean. This, at the end of the day, ayahuasca and like hallucinogens are going to be like, we're already testing ketamine on like vets, you know what I'm saying? Like consciously, like these startups are starting to like see the benefits of these things, because they've went off and they've done their ayahuasca trips, and they've come back and be like, holy shit, like my perspective has changed. Like we could get more of these boomers involved with ayahuasca. Like that's going to shift huge consciously. If we're making a decision not from a place of profit, but from a place of love and understanding, that's going to shift everything. Then like huge. Can't even imagine what that's going to be like. We're talking about a massive global consciousness elevation, which is already what's happening right now. Which like COVID was sort of like, okay, are you on board or not? What side are you on? Yes or no? Yes or no? Do you believe that we can just yes or no? It's really yes or no. It's really yes or no. Go on ayahuasca, I'm telling you. Yeah.
I love how like how do I phrase this? There's like it's like the inner child in you, this like hope and optimism and this light that's just like shining through. And like I'm so much more of like an old person, I feel, when I listen to you talk. I like so much of my worldview is lined by skepticism, but I love seeing what you're working on. I mean, you said something that was really cool, this idea of transforming energies. You know, I think on a very practical level, like that's actually like art, the act of like taking something that is trash and converting it into art is like the highest value conversion that you can do, right? You can take something that is literally worthless and make it worth millions. And I think that, it's a really powerful metaphor for what it is you're trying to do, which is, which is, whether you use energy or you just use actual materiality, that's really what it is. So it's really, really fun. Yeah.
Recognizing that. When I respect your time, and please let me know if you have to bounce off to do.
I mean, I can keep chatting for a little while if you want to continue.
Yes, please, absolutely. And Kyle and Caroline too. If you guys have questions, please jump in. I've got 2 more questions.
Oh, okay, sure, go.
Okay, so when you hear end plastic production, we talked about this a little bit. What's the first line item that comes to mind? Okay, skepticism aside.
Skepticism aside, and plastic production. I mean, maybe it's like kind of uncommon, and I think equity comes to mind, which is an interesting one. Ending plastic production is easy, or like if plastics just was removed instantly, let's just narrow it down to single-use plastics and like food and beverage, because that's like maybe the easiest place to start. It would have devastating effects on people that live in like poor economies. People that, like, how would they get their food and the water? People who live in like the African continents or even like Southeast Asian continents, like they would really struggle. There are 20 million waste pickers that depend on like picking up trash for a living. It's their full-time job, and they earn like $2 a day. And so I think of like the secondary and tertiary consequences of everything. Every change has rolling repercussions on everything. And so how do we make sure that as we move forward and we fix the world's most pressing problems, how do we make sure that nobody gets left behind, or as few people get left behind as possible?
When you say, right, like that is a issue, and this is really the of like the, I feel, okay, and I don't know, and I don't know the really words to put this, but when you say, how will the 20 million waste pickers get their work, like we're not really trying to recreate that right now. You know what I'm saying? Like we're not trying to keep that alive. We're not really trying to keep women earning $2 a day alive. That's not what we want.
Absolutely.
Just because it exists right now doesn't mean that this is something that we want to continue in. Where are they going to get? No, women, no. That's not okay. So when we talk about these things, it's really about like shifting that. Yeah, now they won't have waste to pick up. That's a positive. The negative thing is they won't have jobs. But wouldn't that get shifted? No, and that's not the correct way to enter that conversation, because that's a rhetorical one. But the idea is about education, right? And it's empowerment. For example, in Singapore, we have women coming from Cambodia and Indonesia and Malaysia and Thailand to be maids. They call them maids, okay? And I'm going to explain this concept to Kyle and Caroline. I don't know if any of you are aware of this, but the women that get brought over by these agencies in Singapore make nothing for the first 3 to 6 months of their time in a family. Okay, they're home servants. They're on call 24/7. They get paid $600 a month, something even less than that. And half of that money gets paid to the agencies that take them on. So for the first couple of months, they get paid nothing. It is modern slavery, okay? Painted as domestic help. It's bullshit. And when someone comes in and says, oh, well, at least they're not sex workers, I want to fucking punch you in the face and I want to bury your body deep in the ground. That's my initial response. That's my 16-year-old self coming out right now, okay? But that's how angry I get, because it's that mind frame. It's like, oh, we're going to justify this bullshit because at least it's better than this. And that's really what you're talking about. It's like, that's the dagger in the shell of the crap. These women are going to have better things to do with their time, to raise their families, to get educated, to be literate, write papers, learn, whatever they want to do. That's not doing the bullshit that's happening right now. Okay, so any plastic production, yes, it's going to cause these things, but that's way out. Yeah, I'm sorry, David. David from where the bumfuck nowhere made this thing up, and he's like, oh, we're really gonna, and I'm not shitting on his work because I feel deeply about what he's doing and I appreciate what he's doing, but it's still men creating these industries that use women's labor to paint a thing on and make it seem like it's this great thing. We're talking about cotton pickers. Okay, it's the same thing.
And you're speaking on behalf of these house workers. You're saying they don't they're treated as modern day slaves. They don't get this and that. And it's not, I'm not speaking for the waste pickers. This is what they're saying. They're saying, don't take away our jobs. Don't forget to listen to us as you redesign
Yep.
the systems of the world. Don't forget to think about how we're going to make this transition. And so what I'm saying isn't that their jobs are great. Absolutely agree 100% with you. This is not the path I would choose for myself. And I would wish that these kinds of jobs didn't exist. The question isn't whether or not the jobs should exist or not. The question is, do the people at the bottom of the food chain have a seat at the table when we're having these big systemic world changing conversations? The answer is, at least they're starting to have a seat at the table. So when I was in Nairobi, Kenya, they, like, the waste pickers did have a voice. They're part of these bills that are being rewritten on regulations to ensure that they too can make a transition. And education doesn't happen overnight, right? If you spent your entire life and all you know, you live on imagine that you've grown up living on top of a landfill, working since you were 4 years old, picking trash up at $2 a day, and now you're 15 years old, and now you need to make a transition into another world, into another industry. How do you do that? It's not something that happens in 1 year. It's something that happens in 5 or 10, and you have an entire family to move at the same time. And so what I'm saying is that this is why I think change takes time, because if we remove any one thing too quickly, good or bad, it has all these secondary and tertiary repercussions. And that's actually how we break people's lives, is when we change things too quickly. And so when I say equity, what I'm actually saying is to make sure that people who are affected also get a chance to have their voices heard, and to help them advocate for themselves in terms of what would be the best solution for them. And that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that their jobs should exist. I would wish for all these jobs to never exist.
Thanks for that clarification.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah.
Okay. My final question, and we'll move on to Kyle and Caroline, is in one of the pictures that you had the goose underwater. Was that a real goose?
It was dead. It was stuffed.
Okay. Okay, gotcha. Okay, that's all. That's all I have.
Yeah, the cormorant fisherman is not real, or is not alive.
All right,
Yeah.
I'm done with my questions unless something else comes up. But I really want to pass it over to Kyle and Caroline and Kyle. If you guys have any questions for Ben, we would thank you. You're welcome.
You can go first.
Okay. So I think what really stood out in your presentation was not only your story, but I think the words of encouragement that you had at the end, where you were like, oh, don't worry about trying to stay relevant, because that isn't just a you problem. It's like everyone's problem, especially like even someone like me. And that just felt really encouraging, because sometimes I also feel like that way. I think one question I had to ask was, when you started the plastic activism by working with, I think, the person that you met through going back to Montreal, like, did you care about plastic before, or like was this a concern that you just started noticing like right after you were creating that project?
Yeah, great question. I didn't care about plastics or the environment specifically. I just wanted to make the world a better place, very broadly. And I think that's probably a general sentiment that most people feel. I think, like, I've never grown, like, I feel like I've been really lucky in my general upbringing. And so, like, there's no single topic that I am a huge advocate for that comes intrinsically from within. So falling into plastics, falling into the environmental issues are actually something that happened over time. I think we see a lot of problems in the world, but we rarely pay attention to them. And when I decided that I wanted to move my work from a space of like advertising to one of impact, I started looking for problems and I started learning about them. And I think once you start seeing things, it becomes really hard to unsee them. And so for me, the act of being an activist is about constantly learning about more and more things. And as I learn more, then I start becoming advocates for them. And so, you know, I'm the kind of person, like, I don't love nature. I actually really like cities. And the reason I want to protect nature is so that I can live in my cities, because the world is deeply interconnected. And I think that's like a pretty unique role to play in the activism world, because so much of people who are environmentalists just love nature and they love to go camping and they love to be out in the wild. And I'm like, I don't really love it that much. Like, I think it's kind of cool, but I'm very happy in like the bustling cities of the world. And so, you know, I try to create work from that perspective, from the perspective of saying, well, you don't have to love nature to care about it. You don't have to, like, you can do things out of duty and responsibility and solidarity, and you can do it from a human perspective, while constantly like striving to do better. So every campaign I do is an opportunity for me to learn more about an issue and to deepen my experience and my relationship with stuff. It's less a byproduct of like what I intrinsically care about. I stumble across it. So my activism is an opportunity to upgrade myself, basically.
That's great, Caroline. Thanks for that question.
For me, I'm mostly interested in what you're working on now. Like, what's the big thing now?
So the big thing now for me, so there's 3 problems that I have in my life. So I love to start things like selfishly and then to expand more like holistically, because I think like in order for us to do our best work, we need to feel personally fulfilled with it. You can't just sacrifice yourself all day long for something greater than yourself. So the 3 problems I'm trying to solve in my life, the first is community, a lack of community. I have friends all over the world. I know a lot of people, but I don't have deep community because I'm never in one place for long enough. And so that's one problem. The second is I want to address my inability to create work more frequently. So right now I do 1 or 2 major projects a year, and I just don't think it's enough. I don't think that I am creating work at a pace that is commensurate with the privilege that I have. And I want to like start balancing that out and finding a way to do more regularly. And then the third thing that I really want to have is like teammates. Like, I feel a little lonely and I don't have anyone to commiserate with. And I want to find collaborators and co-creators so I don't have to always build teams from scratch, from zero all the time. So those are the 3 problems I want to solve. And the way I'm going to solve that is I'm in the process of working on an activism studio. I actually bought the domain activism.studio. And I'm going to start prototyping this out. And the idea is, how might I, or we, what is eventually going to be a we, how might we, over these 4 to 6 week cycles, learn together, prototype, build campaigns, launch them, and do this in community with a whole bunch of folks. And the frameworks that emerge will hopefully help artists become better activists. And if this thing is successful, then hopefully I can start franchising it out into different places and spaces. And so I'm in the process right now of creating a nonprofit, building out a team. I think we're going to start in Montreal. I do want to end up in New York, hopefully in 6 to 9 months. And similar to you, find a space, gather folks, and do something. But I want to do it broader than just a singular issue or topic, because I think the world exists in systems. We you know, the world likes simple solutions, like silver bullet solutions, but I don't think the world works that way. We can't just pick one of the SDGs and try to fix it. It's like a Rubik's Cube. You can't just fix one side at a time. You need to fix all 17 sides at the same time. And I think you do that by having a better understanding of the world and how the different pieces connect with one another. So that's what I'm focused on.
Ben, you have us. I mean, I can't speak for Kyle and Caroline because they're their own people, but you have me. And I feel like we connected briefly in 2020, and I feel very, if not exactly the same as you in terms of not having a community, because I am moving quite a lot, and I tend to be overly hopeful about building with people who seem like they care about certain things, and then when the going gets hard, what's the saying, when the going gets difficult, whatever that saying is, they tend to, you know, back out, and they, you know, don't necessarily want to fight in the same capacity. I'm also an Aries, so I can't really expect everyone to go in and like risk their life and their stability in the same ways that I have for this mission, and everybody has their own role to play. But I definitely feel that sense of lack when it comes to wanting to be like, I mean, I have the interns, you know, every couple of months with this program that we go through with the New York City SYED, Summer Youth Employment Program. And then in the winter, they have one for the winter rotation, but it's one of the largest, it is the largest youth employment program in America. So there's the backing of New York City as a municipality, you know, to get us to get going with this. But yeah, Ben, I mean, yeah, you know, like we'll make time to connect outside of this call today and share and continue to share ideas. And when I contacted you in 2020, I didn't have this vision yet. You know, I just like I knew what I wanted to do, and like I knew that this was possible, but I didn't really know exactly how or the steps, or really the believability element too. Like I'm not the same person as I was, you know, two years ago. So there's that too. So I'm creating from a different space as an artist.
Yeah. Well, my you know, I've been nomadic for the last decade, except for like the COVID piece, but my hope is to really start settling in places for longer durations and start building deeper friendships. I've been very inspired by this group that I'm hanging out with here, and during the pandemic, like this group of like 12 friends just decided that they were going to be friends. You know, like when like you're in like elementary school and then you like say like, will you be my friend? They basically did that. They just, you know, found a good group of people and then just decided to like deepen this relationship. And I'm like, oh, I think that's really all it takes to build community. It's an intention to have to like spend time and share values, and to have intentionality around it. So we'll see. I'm starting in Montreal. I feel like Montreal is not the right city for me. I think it's too small, which is why I think New York will be the next one. But I need to prototype what it is I'm building. I need to put some real numbers to it. I need to have some case studies, and then I'll come fundraise in New York. So I might be seeing you soon.
100%. Yeah, Kyle and Caroline are also based in New York City. 6 to 9 months. That's awesome. Okay, so there's two things that I want to bring forward in the conversation that I heard you say. Linguistically, words carry vibrations, right? And so this word launch, I've been like really more intentional about how I use that word because it's a military word, and you can Google like military terms and yeah, right. And it's like a very like corporate. I mean, corporations are essentially military offsets of that creation. So when I actually spent time with Kai one time looking through like synonyms for the word launch. So I was like, we can't be using this word anymore. Like it's like no, but really like again, like drawing this connection to war and like ending war and slavery as like the going home elements, right? Because like that's really where it's all connected.
Well, I'm birthing an activism studio.
Yeah, there you go. And then really for real, and it's like it creates more specificity and funness in it as well. The second thing is nonprofit. The nonprofit industry, because people have asked me like why didn't you make Titties a nonprofit? And something like a wrench got thrown when I was doing my master's program at Clark, when I was doing community development, was I saw the repercussions of so many nonprofits getting born, but the resources that ended up happening became like a lot more depleted because there's so many more going, you know, there's only this much, not to say that we don't live in abundance, but where I was 5 years ago when I was doing this program was like this much resources across like 15 different nonprofits, you know, 7 of them doing the same thing. And so like the nonprofit energy is that we get to create change, but it comes at a cost of someone getting to write a check off at the end of the month. You know, like, oh, I get to taxes are the other thing that's tied into that. So this is why the machine is a little bit tricky, because like these things that are seemingly positive are actually funneled through this guise of beneficiary, but really it's benefiting the people who a lot of the time are the main issues or the main causes of the very things that we're looking to disperse and to dissolve.
Yeah, I can explain why nonprofit. So actually, all right, where do I start with this? Okay, there are 3 sectors that run the world. There's the public sector, the private sector, and the nonprofit sector, right? And these 3 sectors are which all law and accounting is all built on, right? Like everything, the whole world runs on these 3 sectors. But these 3 sectors haven't existed for all the time. Like the nonprofit sector is only 100 years old. And so we can design new sectors. And right now, what we're seeing is a change in these three sectors. We have for-profit companies that are starting to grow a conscience. They're starting to become more social enterprises. We have the B Corp movement. We have a whole bunch of different groups that are trying to be more conscious and trying to go against like this shareholder winner takes all model. On the other side, we have nonprofits that are starting to become increasingly independent. They're starting to generate their own revenue models because they want to be self-sustaining and they don't want to rely on like a grant and donor cycle. And these two forces are actually driving the creation of a fourth sector. The fourth sector is one that is being sort of coined as like a for benefit sector. And I think what I'm really working towards is actually entering the fourth sector with this activism studio, because I want to be a nonprofit, but I also want to be self-generative and self-reliant. So the idea behind starting as a nonprofit is in direct opposition of because I've seen so many creative agencies that are supposed to be B Corps, that are mission driven, that actually just end up becoming greenwashing organizations. Why? Because that's who has the most money. And what ends up happening if you run it as a for-profit entity is that essentially determines that defines your purpose. Your purpose is to make profit. Whereas I think a nonprofit entity is really built at the service of the people, right? The people are the shareholders of the, supposed to be the shareholders of the space and the place. And so my goal is actually to start this off as a nonprofit and to build for-profit entities underneath of it. Essentially what that means is like, so a nonprofit is mission driven by definition, right? You start off with a mission and you don't deviate from that mission. And so you create the container for which the purpose of the studio happens to be. And then under that, you can create a whole bunch of for-profit entities. An example of that very practically is like a museum. A museum is a nonprofit and it has a gift shop. The gift shop is a for-profit. All the money, 100% of the revenue generated from the gift shop goes into the museum. And so we can do the same thing. You can create a nonprofit activism studio that is mission driven, and then you can have a licensing agency underneath of it. You can have a merch store underneath of it. You can have any number of things, and you can actually generate your own revenue. You can be self-sufficient and not be 100% dependent on it. I'm an artist. I have a corporation like Von Wong Inc. And so I have access to the for-profit world. What I don't have access to is a nonprofit world and governmental grants. And so what this would enable me to do is get access to a whole set of funding that I do not currently have access to, and I can continue to make revenue and profit. And so I'm actually thinking the goal is actually to take from all these different sectors, put them all into one bucket, and then figure out how to go. And to keep it mission centric. And I think when you put it under the umbrella of a nonprofit, the mission can't really change. So it's always like, it can never become like the thing that like my ego needs it to be. It always will have to serve the mission over me. And I really like that idea. So that's how I've thought through it.
Beautiful, Ben. Yeah, man, that made me think about like where am I best? Like I was like praying, if you're constantly praying, like use me, like where am I, like what am I supposed to be doing, like how it put me where I need to be, please. And so as you were saying that, it made me think about like maybe, because I really am not going to make multiple business people have told me, CK, start a nonprofit, and I'm like, no, like I'm not, like for me personally, like I'm not absolutely not going to do that, because I fundamentally don't believe in taxes. I don't believe in it. I don't believe that the system that we have right now is really working, and it isn't. And it's not a thinking, it isn't working. So I feel like once I really ground myself in that space, because I'm in that container, I'm able to then devise different solutions from that space, because I'm not I'm not creating, money channels from those things. So I'm sort of like forced to like create in this constraint, which is great. So I just need to stick it through and like figure it out, like where's the money coming from. But I realize that I have this thing that I'm able to get things for free. Really, like back when I used to like club and stuff, I'll get my friends into these clubs in New York City for free by like talking to the bouncer and like cracking jokes.
Farming your way.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, but like using these gifts, right? And like get free donuts, or like I'll be walking through in Florida, and we were walking by Domino's one day, and I was like, I know they're going to throw this food out. And we have a bunch of writers in the room right now because we're on the writing conference. And I was like, you're hungry as fucking, we're poor grad students. And we got like 5 free pizzas, and I gave this guy a flower that I picked out outside of the pizza place. And I was like, bro, like, so I'm starting to learn that, okay, I feel like I have tentacles in areas, and like I know people that have access to capital. So it's like, bringing this in, and then like working with people who I work with personally to be like, I know the work they're doing on a personal level, and like this is where the money can go to, and I figure out a way to pay myself first, and that's what I'm working on as well. Like making these workshops, for instance, and like building out my classes, for instance, and like I'm an actor, and so I do acting sometimes, and I model and I play music. So I'm just like, like I'm not in that space. I don't want to be struggling anymore. Like and what you said just now is like it's not beneficial to be doing this work at the expense of yourself. So that's something that I'm learning
definitely.
to get clear on.
Well, I wish you luck.
I know.
Yeah, you have a lot of energy. It seems like it's just a question of harnessing it properly and putting it to the best use as possible. So your passion is very very tangible.
Cool. I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, working with you and having mentors, man, having people who have done it and who are doing it to guide is essential. Like doing this work by myself is so. Thank you. I want to really, really thank you again.
Sure.
Big, huge time for taking the time to do this and sharing.
My pleasure.
Energy. Yeah.
Cool. Well, good luck with everything. Wish you the best of luck, and we'll stay in touch. You have my number, right?
I don't believe so.
Yeah.
This is a tangential question, but Kyle and Caroline, was there a Ben also, because was there a password to log into this session today?
No,
right?
It's just a link.
Right, exactly.
No, yeah.
One of my friends was trying to get in and he kept asking for the passcode. I gave him the meeting ID number, but he says it keeps asking for a meeting passcode. Okay, yeah, we'll talk about that.
If you look on the upper left corner, there's a little green shield on Zoom. You can click on that and then you can get the passcode. I mean, they always come with a passcode. It depends on which link they got. So if you ever need to find it in the future, that's how you find it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the individual that was trying to log on, his name is Calvin, and I'm bringing him on board as, we don't really have a title for him yet. He's done a bunch of stuff in New York City. A bunch of stuff, and we can talk about that another point. Growing the team, essentially.
Cool. Head of growth.
Yeah.
All right, I'll catch you soon. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Kyle. Thanks, Caroline. Bye. Kyle and Caroline, if you guys are still there, I'll see you guys in a couple of hours at 3 p.m. EST for our session.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you guys want to talk about anything before that, or discuss stuff?
I finished emailing all the Brooklyn council members. That's all I did today so far. And I emailed some, all the ones on the Committee for Environmental Protection.
Got you. Okay, thank you. I'm gonna take a look and see those emails today. Thanks for doing that, Kyle. Caroline, it's your last day. I thought about that last night. I was driving this morning.
Well, technically, I can work tomorrow.
Oh my God. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, I finished the infographic. I can send that to you.
What?
I think the infographic. But I had like the order that you had. I don't know if you want the order that Ben has instead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Order what?
Ben had a different order. He had like slaughterhouses first because of the economic situation in the economy and capitalism.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want that order instead.
I still don't really
like completely different or different, like the process, like where you end plastic and then end slaughterhouses.
I see what you're saying. Got you. Okay, yeah, that's a great point. Okay, so it makes me feel like, so this video is going to be recorded, and then if Emma is able to edit it down, that could be like a really cool segment to include as a snippet in, I don't know yet, maybe like the final presentation. But I mean, ideally Ben would be there in person to be able to speak into this point. Maybe for simplicity's sake, that could be like a talking point instead of necessarily its own slide. And we can mention during the session that Ben, who we've been working with, he believes that we could end slaughterhouses before plastic. But again, these and it's great that we have like different ideas and like different perceptions about this issue. and not to say that I'm 100% right? Like, I mean, obviously, if like we can end the houses before plastic, that would be amazing. Like, if we can end war before any of this, it would be amazing. But it's really about it happening at the same time, and this like energy. And this is the thing about tracing energy is like, there's no like how our minds have been molded to only want data or like to see it like, where is the data? Like, where is the evidence of this happening? Because we can't really see it. It's more of like a feeling thing and like a knowing thing. Man, it's a shifting, it's really like shifting paradigms. So I would keep it as a talking point instead of its own slide. But also this video is going to be put up on the YouTube, so people can go ahead and watch this entire conversation, which yeah, that would be great to get the fuller context of the story.
Okay, I put the infographic in the Canva for you to take a look at.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Do you have it on you right now, Caroline? Could you maybe drop it as a link in the chat, please? And then I'll take a look at it. Oh God. I'm just gonna save this number. Thanks you guys for joining the call today. I'm really surprised that not many other people, but that's okay. Like, thanks, Caroline. 025. Definitely, my next strategy is I'm speaking with someone from a CRM digital marketing campaign. So we really do need marketing to happen on a much larger scale. Done. Okay. Sweet. Okay. Lovely. Thanks. Check this out. We can see what this is. Whoa. All right. I'm going to share my screen so Kyle, you can. Oh, right. Yeah, Kyle, you can. Kyle, are you able to click on the Canva link and get inside so you can take a look and see yourself?
I don't have access. Screen share it for me.
Sure. Okay. All right. Oh, baby G. Okay. Yeah, okay, got you. Okay, so first things, Caroline, we can split this infographic into two sections. The first section deserves its own deal. So the first thing that people would see is the ending plastic. So please make another, let's see what you have on the bottom. Yeah, you can split the two sections. So the stuff on the left, right? So the blueprint stuff, that can be its own slide. You know, I mean, and also ideally here actually TBH, TV is super TV. I know like in infographics when it's supposed to be like one thing. So let's make one that's like really, how do you say, simple, I guess, or like minimal. So we focus on ending plastic, and then the arrow goes to end slaughterhouses, and then that goes, because once you have the left side eliminated as its own slide, then you can sort of move the right section over a little bit more, and then you can end plastic as the first thing, and then sort of like imagine this semicircle, or like this like almost like an Ouroboros, you know what I'm saying? Because ending slavery, you know, it can go back sort of like to the idea of ending plastic as a notion of slavery of land and resources, but it doesn't necessarily like directly, you know, and then also really to like mimic the, have you guys heard of the Ouroboros? Here, I'm gonna show you guys what I mean. Here we go, like the snake biting its own tail. So like Caroline, so like mimic this sort of imagery, but like with, you know, plastic as the head, right? And then like it's maybe if you can break this into like maybe, you know, 6 sections, and the second one, you know, 1/3 of that would be, you know, slaughterhouses, and then homelessness at the semi end, and then on the left section there will be poverty, and then up there will be war, and then slavery is like the tail of the, you know, so that gives you like a visual. Does that make sense, Karen?
I'll see what I can do.
Okay. And then the blueprint section on the bottom. Yeah, just like move, sorry, move the blueprint. So the plastic, leftover plastic, the class that's excellent, we need your help, excellent. That can be moved down to the second section, again, in a similar frame of the Ouroboros. And then also, Caroline, did you manage to put the Eventbrite link on the website? Well, Caroline, I think you're muted. Let's see. Yeah, where are we? Caroline, did you hear me?
I don't really know what you want me to do, like in general. Like, could you write it down or something? Because it's a lot of information.
For which part?
Like splitting it into two, or like you want two infographics, or you want two pages now?
Yes, because right off the top, it's a lot of information to take in all at once. So by splitting it, it gives us two different sections. And actually there should be three.
The plastic section is literally just those 4 boxes on the left, right?
Yeah, well, it's 6, 2, 4, 6, yeah.
What? Wait, the left ones?
Yeah.
Or, okay. Okay. And then the 6 other boxes, you just move it down one
The 4.
and make it like the, well, on the right, you move that to the second page.
No, the right stuff, the 6 boxes on the right, stay on the first. And then the left section goes into the second slide.
Okay. Do you want to add slides? I thought you wanted like an infographic to give to people first, and then under slides you make it separate.
Yes, I hear what you're saying. When I say slides, I mean it's how do you say it? It's like a, oh my God, my brain is dissolving. I feel it.
Because I thought this was like a flyer that you give to people.
Yes. Yes, we are still doing that. We're 100% still doing that. But visually, right now, it's a lot of information. And I myself, I'm gonna speak for myself. Like when I look at this, I'm just like, where do I even start? It's like and like I can see the arrows 100%. I can follow the arrows, but it's still very much like to make our message super clear and then to give people steps. So ideally, it would be 3 infographics, which would then can be utilized as their slides in a presentation. So at the end of the presentation, they still have a physical thing to take home with them, or a PDF attached to an email, or a recap of the experience. And then also, and then that we will have these 3 main infographics as a talking point, as like wherever we go, we can bring these 3 images, and we don't have to make a whole presentation. We can like refer to these 3 infographic slides that will really like provide the framework for us to go inside the research that we're sharing.
Okay, got it. I'll just split it then.
Thanks, Karen. I appreciate that. Thank you. This is excellent. This is super, super excellent. And I love the fact that like you included join our classes as well. Like that is like, thank you. Like I don't really do a good job of making the call to action, which is like join us, right? Like, so thank you for doing that, for catching that. Yeah. Maybe like one more section that I forget if I shared it with you, but it was the 6 steps of how we're going to eliminate plastic production, starting with our plastic at home and then building that out into the labor practices and stuff. But I'm going to spend some time after this. I'm going to take a break and go outside and check on Mika in the van and make sure she's okay outside in the heat, and come back in and rework this and then get ready for I'm going to drive for a little bit more and then get closer to New York City, because I do have to be at a music video today at like 5, which I don't feel like I'm going to make it anymore unless I speed, but I'm not going to do that because we're supposed to have this. Okay. And then yeah, and then I'll see you guys at 3 for our second section. And I believe Renee is going to join, and I'll figure out Calvin's situation as well to see if he can log in for that. And then yeah, man. And then I'll be in New York City in a couple of hours. So I'll be there by tonight at least. And then maybe what would be crazy if we could meet physically. I know Caroline ends tomorrow for school. Maybe we'll figure out, yeah, I'll talk to Tony and see how we can maybe use the SYEP space or the Chinese American Council space for our presentation. I'll figure that out. But I'll be in the city, so I'll be able to do that and walk around it. Okay. Caroline, sorry. Is there anything else?
No, I'm good.
Okay, sorry. So the last thing about that, Caroline, was the Eventbrite link on our website. I don't know if you have time to take a look and see
Okay, I'll
if
add
there's.
it.
Do you know how to do that?
Yeah,
Okay, thank
I
you.
mean, just add it in the section, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Or maybe, you know what you could do? You know what? Oh my God, Jesus Lord. I'm gonna have to make another Eventbrite actually for our curriculum. I mean, for our plastic museum classes. But I'll work on that. Oh my God, Jesus Christ. Yeah, I'll get to that. Yeah, Carol, I really wish we had you for like another week, or like a semi-permanent position, obviously paid, for you to like keep. Maybe we can talk offline about that. Okay, cool. Kyle, is anything?
No, I don't have anything else. I'm just gonna continue with the emailing, and you said something about crowdfunding.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, well, I need to take a look at the playbook. I'm gonna send that to you once we get off here. Write this down actually.
I think for me and Emma, we only have 1 week left too.
Yeah. Oh, I don't have my pen with me. That's okay. Oh yeah, Caroline, if you could also include this slide, share this with you into the PDF that you're working on. Yeah. Okay. Crowdfunding. Let's see here. What would that be? Guys, my brain right now is like not working. What am I trying to do? I'm trying to log into. Cancel those things out. Also, give myself a little bit. I think it's TV's Liberatory. Can I call me? I forget which drive I saved the playbook, the crowdfunding. Hey, it is these. All right, share. Ding. Okay. Kyle, there is a section here. You know what? You go ahead and take a look and see the playbook that I sent you, and based off of the timeline that you created in the first week, let's have a meeting outside of this to discuss this specifically. Take a break from work for a bit. I will come back. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm reading this.
Yeah, read this and make some notes, ask me some questions, figure out, how we can really get this. The one thing that I do know that I have information in is the network mapping. I've worked with a coach from ITHAN Women to get our pitch correct, and I can send you that pitch once we meet again online. And then the timeline and the work back and the rewards. I've made the reward strategy. I do want to include some like yummy rewards with people that I've met from like the Duen, the Dell, like women entrepreneurs in technology, and some of them have like SEO knowledge. So I want to be able to give people maybe 30 minutes of like talking with a SEO coach or like a digital marketing agency with Her Brand Co. And I give, business entrepreneur people like, not like my chatbots, which I love my chatbots and I'm proud of them, but I could really see that being more of a beneficial thing for them. So I work on the rewards marketing strategy. That's what I'm really working on that right now. I'm taking this course with Her Brand Co. I have until September 17th to finish like over 50 hours of curriculum to learn about our marketing strategy and to really figure out where our funding is going to go. And then the ask, which is the commercial space, and that will be worked on once we're in the city and I can meet with the necessary people, the necessary players. I'm going to hop on the phone with Erin Williams, who was I used to work under her when I was managing the Worcester pop-up. I was the project coordinator for that. So and that's why I'm saying that we can make this happen, because I've actually been part of a team that did make it happen back in 2009. No. 14. Yeah. So the bank essentially like donated a space for the city of Worcester, and then we worked with the Department of Economics and the Worcester Culture Coalition. So there are many like people that came together to like bring the funds and like make this, where I was like literally like in a warehouse, and we cleaned the warehouse out, and I was in charge of like filling the warehouse with programming and events and all that stuff. So I have that knowledge that I can like bring forward to this project, and we'll make our healing hub happen. The goal is to make a healing hub happen in New York City. And once we have a physical space, bam, bam, bam. Okay, so that's the goal. How? Okay, my loves, I have to go back and check on my baby girl in the car. She's been in there for like almost 2 hours alone. So I will check in with you guys a little bit, and I will see you guys in about 3 hours.
Yeah.
Okie dokie. Bye.